Welcome to the Sharpe Club. I know it has been a while, but I am back. Some of you, I'm sure, are crying. You may rejoice now that I have returned. It is 9 p.m. here Monday on the East Coast. So happy to join the Sharpe Club tonight. I'm talking about what I think is a really interesting topic, a topic that most of us are seeing, if we're not feeling it directly, is polarization all over our nation, in our families, our friends, our jobs. People we're dating, on TV, in our media, and everything, such deep polarization. So I brought together a New York-centric crew. So you non-New Yorkers, too bad. We're super cool. We are here today from New York. Everyone is in New York tonight, which is great. And people from the left and the right and all in between. I'm going to bring them on right now if I could. First, I'm going to bring on someone who you've seen before more than once. He is a political commentator. He is a host, also known as the Dragon of the Southern Tier. My friend Michael Vass. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm always happy to be here with you, Larry, and to talk about all the different issues we're going to cover. You always pick the best panels. I mean, I have a fun time. It's going to be great.
I like that. That's good. So I hope everyone else feels the same way. Otherwise, we're gonna have a problem. Also from New York, a gentleman who actually runs a gaming community. He's administrator there, and he's also an activist. Brought him on board. Hopefully, he will enjoy tonight's show. Deven Smith, how are you, sir?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm doing all right. Hectic day at work, but I'm here to have some fun.
I am glad. And an author, and a writer, and a host of his own psychology podcast. That sounds amazing. And he actually focuses on things like polarization. Zach Elwood. How are you, sir?
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing okay.
Of course. Happy to have all of you here. And for those of you who want to follow them and check them out, you can absolutely. All of the descriptions are actually in the description on YouTube and also on Facebook if you want to, or follow them on Twitter. You see right there at the bottom, the Twitter to follow them. MV Consult is for Michael. A poker player is for Zach. And the Narborough, hope I said that right, is Deven. So let me ask the question. The one that I think drives me personally the most crazy is that every time there is a big deal, a big topic that pops up, we tend to jump on one side or the other. And I mean we generically, as a nation, not necessarily you, but as a nation, we jump on one side or the other based upon what our talking head says is the right side, right? So Trump gets arrested, and if your talking head says this is the evilest thing in the world, you believe it's the evilest thing in the world. If your talking head says he deserves it, he should go to jail forever, you believe that, and you don't even bother looking at any facts. Like the facts don't matter at all. All that matters is what my talking head says. This has got to drive you crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Deven, tell me.
Well, I think it's very irritating the fact that people will just immediately jump on a bandwagon one way or the other without going through and trying to find out all the facts of the situation.
Well, Michael, you hear this constantly. I mean, you interview people, you hear this constantly.
Yeah.
And be clear, Michael, you go down rabbit holes.
Oh, yeah.
So you actually do go down rabbit holes to check the data.
Yeah, I do that's the whole point. You got to go into the research. You can't just trust people with what they say, especially politicians. We see them reverse positions far too often. The problem is we've trained over the last 20 years, we've been training generations to just go with the headline. I mean, that's what Twitter is, just headlines, and not to ask any questions. And if you do ask a question, well, social media, the internet in general will beat you up and say, oh, you're the bad guy. You're the problem because you're asking a question, even when we have the proof that the authorities and the experts with their bias have been proven wrong by their own standards. You know,
isn't it difficult here, right? I mean, everything pops up. Isn't it basically information overload?
No.
Like, I mean, if I want to go down a rabbit hole, there's 40,000 rabbit holes for me to go down. And I can go down that rabbit hole and stay at rabbit hole for 6 months if I want to, right? Isn't there some overload here too? When do I know when to stop? When do I know that I got it? I'm good.
The easy answer on that is when you are satisfied with the answer you have. It's not a question of misinformation, disinformation. It is about information.
But I'm going to do what Deven said. I'm going to have my talking head tell me, and I'm satisfied, right? My talking head told me that this is the right thing. I'm now satisfied. I don't have to go any further. I'm good.
No, you always have to take the first step, which is verify. Verify what they've said. Then after that, you may be interested to find out more. It's how you look at movie reviews. Make it as basic as I can. Movie reviews, video game reviews. Someone said, doesn't matter who it is, said this game is good. Now you, at this point, your thing is, well, you can go onto YouTube and see someone playing the game, or maybe they'll have a trailer of the video of the movie. They'll have someone commenting on it. You've now taken an extra step. You've verified that this one person said something, and now you're starting to see. Now, maybe you only need to go to one other source that you trust, and now you've confirmed or denied that. Fantastic. You're done. Maybe someone else wants to know more. Maybe they want to read the original book this was based on, or the comic book.
But let me go down. Let me go to Zach here. Zach, you deal with the two. Are people? I think Michael is correct. I'm not fighting him being correct. I'm worried that people are going to do what Deven said and just go, I don't have time for that, Mike. I'm just going to listen. Larry said that I'm right, so I'm going to agree with Larry and I'm right. Is that what happens?
Well, I think the forces of polarization are so strong. I mean, I think as someone interested in depolarization and educating people about polarization, I think we often focus so much on who's right or who's wrong instead of focusing on the simple, obvious fact that it's very easy for people to believe vastly different things. And especially when a society becomes polarized, which is a very ubiquitous state for a society to enter, you know, we often act like America is the only country going through this, and we have a completely unique situation. But I think the meta level for me is, and I've anchored people on the right and the left when I talk about this, because people want to focus on who's right, who's wrong. But I think the more meta approach is to focus on, we can clearly believe vastly different things. And the more we get agitated at each other and angry at each other for believing different things, the more those divides widen, right? It's almost like we become intolerant to the idea that other people can believe very different things from us, but clearly they can believe very different things from us. And especially in, like you're saying, Larry, with this environment where there's so many sources, and we can easily filter for the things we want to focus on and easily form narratives that are vastly different, whether they're right or they're wrong. I often think that we focus so much on that right or wrong judgmental phase, as opposed to getting to this higher transcend that level a little bit and say, hey, I can see how you believe this vastly different thing, even though I
but Zach, here's the problem. What you said, the first part of what you said stops the second part of what you said, right? If all I'm going to do is focus on who's wrong, so I don't even worry about the argument. Right. I just go, I think Michael is bad for whatever reason I've decided, so I now attack him. I don't attack his idea. I just go, Michael's bad because he's the thing that I've been trained to say is bad. So he's that thing. So he's bad. Therefore, his argument, Zach, is irrelevant because he's bad.
And that's where, that's where it gets into the, the conflict resolution, depolarization train of school of thought would be, you can work towards whatever political goal you want. You can work hard towards whatever political goal you want, but while speaking respectfully and while speaking persuasively. And you can be, what they say, hard on ideas but soft on people, which is, you can criticize ideas without making it personal. You can say that's a very bad idea for these reasons, instead of being like, that person is a bad person for thinking X, and I think that's really,
and the system doesn't help. In fact, let me take a quick super chat if I could. Those of you want to super chat, you can, please feel free. Roger, thanks for the $5, says, so true, Larry. I'm on a mission to increase the number of registered indies, he means independent voters, match numbers of registered Dems in New York State, make America think critically again. So let me walk down that road with him, right? And that is the two-party system, is that part of the problem? Right? So if I am a lefty or righty and I consider myself a Democrat, Republican, don't I then have to, if I'm a Republican, hate Democrats? I'm a Democrat, don't I have to hate Republicans? And so if there's more independence, it's like, oh, Mike's like, no, go ahead, Mike, take it.
No, and this kind of goes to what Zach is talking about. Actually, it goes to the theme of the entire discussion today. The problem is there's two major parts to this. One, people don't know that they're in an echo chamber. They don't have the knowledge to be able to recognize whether or not the information they're receiving needs to be challenged, or that there is even a challenge to it. So we don't know where we stand, and therefore we don't know where we can stand to be compromising on certain things. We don't have that knowledge. All we have is an emotional plea or fact-based plea that may or may not be correct, and we haven't taken a step to investigate it. Now, the second part of the problem is, as we get younger and younger generations in America, they have been taught more and more that any disagreement, any challenge to what you have said, it's a challenge against authority. That is a microaggression. It is equivalent to violence. And therefore, you are authorized, you are okay to take whatever actions necessary, which is where we get the character assassination attempt. Because now this is justified, because you must, according to the way they have been taught, anything that violates your emotions is an attack, and therefore a personal attack is justified then. And I get this a lot. I don't know if
it's almost like I'm not just canceling somebody from a TV show or a blog post. I'm like canceling their life. Like they're just done. They don't get to make money. They don't get to have a family. They're just complete. And it's off. It's to your point. I feel righteous doing it because the person is bad, right? The person is wrong, or the person is evil. I think a lot of people do believe that. But look, to toot my own horn here, one of the reasons why I put this panel together is because Deven got mad at me online. So I said, come on my show and tell me what you feel. So then I said, you know who I'm going to get? Deven, I know, leans left. So I said, okay, he leans left. That's awesome. I'll bring on Mike. Mike leans right. Then I said, Zach, he's all about this. That's how I put this together, actually. So I'm trying to create the non-echo chamber, but I'm not as big as the other people. My plan isn't working.
Well, they don't want it to. They want you to be silenced. Again, it's what we're seeing. The reaction in the public is just the consequence of what we've seen structured by major media, by the internet overlords, and political agendas on both sides, left and right, where they're there to say, you cannot question what is being said, no matter what is said, no matter whether it is right or wrong.
Deven, I'm seeing your face. You got something to say.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you had said a while back ago, just like, I forgot how you phrased it exactly. But there's just, you were talking about how kids were raised to think like being emotionally challenged is they associate that with actual violence. I haven't seen that. I'm most likely the youngest out of the four of us here. And when I was growing up, that wasn't what we were taught. However, I've seen how the youth right now act, and it's more or less, it seems like they don't have that much discipline in their lives. It's not more or less about how, like, oh, they're taught this way. No, it's like their parents don't care. They don't like help them. They don't give them money. They don't help them in
This
schools.
is what I've seen, right? There's a point that I've seen here that I think I agree with you on this, is I feel like a lot of kids as they're growing up, and I have kids who are in their teenage. I have two teenagers. So I'm kind of in that from a parental world. I'm not obviously a teenager, but I see it from a parental world. And in that regard, I do see a lot of teens really get upset over perceived slights. And I say perceived slight because it's not always a slight, right? Sometimes it is a slight. I mean, kids can be mean and cruel and can say horrible things. And sometimes they can make mistakes. But the perceived slight, the retaliation is almost a pylon, like the mob gets them, right? Because someone has a perceived slight. And what winds up happening is the kids, as they get older, they self-censor. That I worry about. Like now kids aren't going to say what they're thinking as they become adults because they're worried, what does the mob think? And part of that's normal, right? Human nature, right? We don't necessarily want to go against what our own peer group says, every day. But we also don't want to be so afraid that we can't be honest with ourselves. Is this even part of the problem, or am I missing something?
Well, no, it's part of this, what we're talking about right now, because very much so, at least in the way that I've seen in conversations in the media that I've covered, we're hearing from colleges, from high schools, from junior high schools repeatedly that the lessons about microaggressions, about entitlement, about supporting the authority, whether that's, and very often that's the internet overlords, the approved message that we're hearing from elected leaders in various organizations.
But I got to touch with this is kind of what Zach's talking about, right? The authority is only the one that I agree with, right? So if I'm on the right, I listen to what Fox News says. If I'm on the left, I listen to what MSNBC says, and that's my authority. If I'm a lefty and I go against what Tucker Carlson says, I'm good. I'm supposed to. Right? I've been trained. He's the bad guy, right? If I'm a righty and I go against what I don't know, whoever's in a what Don Lemon says, then I'm good because I'm a righty, and Don Lemon's obviously bad guy, so I can go against him.
But
isn't
they're all
the
wrong.
Authority figure isn't even the authority figure biased?
But that is the problem, the authority figure bias. I think Zach would agree with me, and I think Deven as well, that that's the problem. We have trained generations to accept that and never take another step. That you're only going to, if you're on the right, you can only watch Fox, which is crazy. If you're on the left, you can only watch CNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, and so on.
But don't forget CNN.
CNN, of course, CNN and New York Times and Washington Post. I mean, there's my point. They've got plenty, but you are only, this is the channel you're in. This is the only one that you're supposed to get. And you've got plenty of teachers. You've got plenty of TV shows. You've got plenty of comic books that are telling you this is the only answer. We've forgotten to say,
hold on. I guess the point is, Zach, you're literally writing a book on this now, right? Or have you already written your book on this?
Well, I've written a book, but I want to make it a little bit slimmer and more efficient. But yeah, I have written a book that's out there now. Yeah.
So do you cover this? Are we in the right realm here to be dealing with the idea that media, social media and traditional media, right? Both New York Times, right? TV, and also how Facebook puts us together, and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all the things. Aren't they kind of making, to Michael's point, aren't they kind of making us, putting us into echo chambers to where we don't even think, right? I mean, there are people I know who can't imagine people don't think the way they think. I remember the last election, I knew both Democrats, Republicans, and so many Democrats that I knew couldn't imagine anybody would vote for Trump, and so many Republicans couldn't imagine anybody would vote for Biden. Like they thought that there's no way anyone could vote the opposite way that they vote. They didn't even imagine it. And again, I get if you liked Biden or Trump better. I mean, I don't. But if you like either of them better, I get it. But the point that you would not even imagine that someone else would think differently. That's the part.
Yeah, I think so I think we often try to look for these factors, these magic bullet causes for the polarization. But I think the fact is, you look at history, you look at most of the countries around the world, actually, research has shown have been increasing in polarization. And I think just understanding that it's a natural human tendency, it's a natural group psychology tendency for us to get into these patterns, and they're self-reinforcing patterns. And I think we tend to focus on the media is doing something, or the politicians or the elites are doing something, but these are all just people, right? Everyone's just a bunch of people, and they're all acting out the same things that could happen. Like if you took, a bunch of people, hundreds of years ago somewhere and had no technology, the same dynamics can act out. We just have different ways of playing it playing out now. So we focus on, and I think the thing, I've written pieces about how you could see, the digital age as an amplifier, basically like an amphetamine of human behavior. It's basically like we had monolithic media, in the last 100 years with radio and big TV channels. And then you have the splintering of the TV channels, and you have the internet, which is basically like an amphetamine for human interaction. Right. So it's not surprising that it would be an accelerant of polarization, which, some polarization researchers would agree with in that area. People I've interviewed for my show. And I think people who start to see the flaws in both sides can sometimes reach this kind of, to me, a little bit paranoid perspective where they like somebody's pulling the strings on both sides. But to me, it's kind of like nobody's really pulling the strings. It's more like everybody's got various degrees of bias and blindness to their, and they're also trying to appeal to an audience too, right? So it's like people on both sides can be like, well, I have an incentive to appeal to this audience, and I also believe it mostly. So things just accelerate.
People at the very top, don't the people at the super top,
well,
don't they actually not care at all? Don't they actually
I would say,
this to divide us?
So I interviewed Elizaveta Friesem, who wrote a book called Media is Us, which is about the idea that the media is, just a bunch of people. It's us. It's the things that happen with the media are the same things that happen with human psychology. And I think it's really hard to say, she would agree with this, and other people would agree that it's really hard to say where the power resides, right? Because you can see political leaders and media leaders as being shaped by the will of the people. Like they have to give the people what they want, and if they don't, somebody else will. I mean, that's not to say they don't have power, but it's not a simple. It's kind of like sometimes politically liberal people have simplistic definitions of how power works, right? It's like power is these people at the top. But I think the truth is that it is a very complex dynamic where, like, if it wasn't somebody giving that to them, the people might seek another channel. So you can see these incentives for how people behave at the,
Michael's ready to jump out of his seat. Let me let him say a couple things. Go ahead, Michael. Say something. Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying there, Zach, but I don't think that's, at least in the examples that I've seen, as a point. When we're talking about, say, MAGA, Make America Great. Yes, I can see what you're saying. They're appealing to a pre-existing idea that America must be bad and Republicans must be evil, and therefore making America great, a implicitly and by definition positive thing, is now seen as a negative. But I don't see that applying to things like when we're told about the Ukraine and we must support that, about the trans political movement, not the individuals, but the trans political movement and blind affirmation that we must give. Critical race theory, identity politics, going into climate change and the authority bias, even though they have always been wrong in every single case. These aren't things that the public believe. These are the things that they are told to believe.
Well, Michael,
interesting dynamic.
Michael, can't you say the same thing about conservative issues? I mean, aren't there people? Do you think it's possible you find it hard to understand the liberal perspective, so you find it hard to believe that a lot of people on the other side actually believe a lot of those things and believe those are good things?
No, I actually spend a lot of time to make sure that I research and understand, and I can literally take every liberal position, every progressive position, and defend it perfectly.
Sure, but I'm just saying, don't you think that the dynamic exists on both sides of people actually believing they're doing good things, but you can perceive them as, I mean, what makes you think that they're being cynically? What makes you think people are promoting ideas that they don't believe? I guess
I think there's a different degree of magnitude that is very different, which is based on not societal actions, but by political maneuvering and manipulation. And that's where I think the difference is. Because yes, you can definitely say, as a society, we don't want to see dictatorships in the world in American culture, because that's what we're used to fighting against. I'd agree with that. But again, I'll go back to climate change as an example. The average person doesn't have an opinion about climate change. They just know the weather. The weather changes every day. Most people don't realize that climatologists since 1958 have always been wrong. There isn't a model, a prediction. Nothing has ever been true.
No, but I got to let me chip in this one. I think there's a confusion here, right? I think what Zach is saying is that the people want it. I think that's true. What I think Michael is saying is that they didn't know they wanted it until someone told them they need to want it, is what I think he's saying. He's saying that Michael's saying that, yes, people do care about climate change because someone told them to care.
Well, yes. I think we're talking about, I think we're talking about two different angles. I'm not saying that those people, I'm not saying that they don't have, the people, that are opinion shapers don't have power. I'm saying it's a complex system where those people are not like acting cynically. They actually believe what they're saying, just like the other side can be criticized for shaping, influencing opinions, and they believe, they also believe what they believe, or they have incentives for giving an audience what they want. You know, it's a complex system. I think oftentimes we have too cynical perspectives of the other side, whichever side we're on. You know, it's like we could easily have those perspectives that the other side, the leaders or the influencers on the other side are acting cynically or disingenuously.
But Zach, I want to give you a little pushback on one part. You said that the leaders have to give the people what they want. I don't know if that's true. I think evidence has shown that, and please push back if I'm wrong. I think most people who are Democrats want lots of things and received almost nothing. Most people who are Republicans have wanted a whole lot and received almost nothing. Like most of the people who wanted the things have received almost none of the things.
Well,
what the Democrats and Republicans have done very well is keep these issues in the front and never solve them. And so the people fight. Go ahead, Deven.
I think this all kind of circles right back to the two-party system. I think at this point in time, each side is just kind of too big, almost quote unquote, too big to fail. Because, I mean, at this point in time, you're like, I go outside, people are either Democrat or Republican, and they don't really try and have their minds changed or change anyone else's minds.
I know. I've been trying for years, Deven. I've been trying for years. I know.
Well, I wouldn't say it's correct, though, because as we know, and it's been studied and polled and everything, that only about 25% of America is Republican. About 25% is Democrat at any given moment. Within those groups, there are splinters, like the Progressive Party is about 7% of Democrats. The far right is approximately 3% of all Republicans. The majority of America, about 40-ish%, are actually somewhere in the center, usually leaning somewhere around center right to some degree. That's what we have seen historically and currently in every single study that has been done. So, no, most people aren't Democrat or Republican. Most people are in the middle, depending on the issue that we're speaking about, where they'll.
Well, since you just gave me that opening, let me do a little bit of admin if I could. Speaking about that, my sponsor, theadvocates.org, they have the world's smallest political quiz. For those of you who take that, here's some data that backs up Michael. If you take that quiz, if you go to theadvocates.org, who are my sponsors, you can go there. It is absolutely free. Take the world's smallest political quiz. You can come up 5 different ways. You can come up libertarian, moderate, authoritarian, conservative, progressive. You know what the most common outcome is? To Michael's point, moderate. It is still the most common point that comes up. It's not a majority, it's a plurality. Most people who take the test actually come up moderate. If you want to take that test, please do so. It is free. It keeps my sponsors happy, and share your results. Also, if you happen to be watching on Twitter, do me a favor, retweet this show right now. If you're watching on Twitter, retweet it right now so people can see this conversation, join in and talk to us. If you want to get your comment up front, you can super chat it. If you're on Larry Sharpe YouTube, super chat it right now. That's awesome. But no matter what, if you want to get past all these algorithms, you can by liking the button, clicking that like button right now. Click like. It does matter. Some of you are not clicking like, and you are now making me upset, and I'm going to cry. And it will not look good if I cry here. You will all be embarrassed and shame yourselves. So please click the like button. It does matter that much. But more important than all that stuff, follow these people who've shown up today to give us a conversation, to chat. Go on Twitter, follow them at MB Consult, A Poker Player, and the Narborough. All their data information is actually on the description here on both YouTube and Facebook. So anyway, I'm sorry, I yapped away. I just wanted to do a little bit of that homework there.
But so part of the reason why I was mentioning that, though, is
go ahead.
And Dan Tuck, one of the commenters, Dan Tuck, he has a comment there, and he's saying we aren't asking questions like, am I wrong? Are we having critical thinking? Again, this goes back to what I'm saying is people are looking at, this is what's being shoved at me by the mainstream media, whether left or right. It is being reinforced by social media. And again, we're being told, don't ask the question, don't step out of your lane. And I think that's where the polarization comes from. People are not able to, because in my conversations, there are many people who are in that center and they are terrified to have their voice heard. They either think they are the only one, or they're afraid of being ostracized and punished, maybe at work or socially.
Because and this is the point that Zach's bringing up here, right? The issue that I have is it's not that It's not that I agree with you. I'm not with you, Deven, because I agree with you. I'm with you because we both hate the same person, or we both hate the same people, or we both hate the same idea. We are joined by the hatred or the anger, not by us being like, we're not both for whatever, Medicare for all. We're not both for that, but we both hate the evil Republicans, right? So now we're together because we hate the evil Republicans. It doesn't matter if we agree on anything else. And that to me becomes scary. Zach, is that normal? Or is polarization usually because we agree on things, or is polarization because we hate the other?
Yeah, I think it becomes, like you say, it becomes mainly about your dislike of the other party and not so much, your appreciation of your own party. It mainly becomes you're voting against someone else, right? Which is, helps explain why the elections, despite the diverse range of opinions, can be so close, because you've just got people saying, well, if I have to pick, I dislike that person more. But yeah, I think, and I do want to emphasize that, for people interested in these things, I mean, there's a wealth of writing and research about these polarization dynamics, and we tend to act like America is something unique but you can find this same stuff playing out in so many countries with different issues, vastly different issues. So I do like to emphasize that, because that in itself is depolarizing and anger reducing, when we can recognize what a human behavior and dynamic it is.
Okay, Deven, go ahead.
I was going to spring back off of Zach's point there, is that we're not the only country in the world that has great divide right now. I mean, if you look in countries like France or in Britain, there's a lot of protests and stuff going on right now. There's divide everywhere, and it really stems from just people, as you guys keep saying, of not wanting to critically think, not going, as that one commenter had said, to think, am I wrong? Is this the right thing to do? There's not a sense of accountability for that, I would say.
Yeah, and you can look at some other countries that are very dislike ours. Like Venezuela is an interesting one to study, where completely different issues, completely different dynamics, but the same kind of tribal things building up. And to your point, Michael, about the our frustration with the media, I think if we're going to get to some healthier state in the future, where more people are cognizant of these dynamics. I mean, that's a big part of what I work on, is just getting more people to see how the dynamics work. And I think a healthier state of things is where we just don't expect that much from the media, because the media is going to, we kind of have this expectation that the media is going to be this unbiased or unpolarized source of information, but it's just never going to be that, right?
Yes.
Unless something vastly changes, we have a cultural change, a big cultural change.
But don't we still have this kind of idea, almost like nostalgia, that it used to be that way back when Walter Cronkite was the guy and he was the straight, honest guy? And don't we have that nostalgia?
No, we don't.
I mean, I personally don't, but I am aware of other people who are like, oh, I wish it was the good old days. And I'm like, that wouldn't be good right now either.
For those who are 65 and older, probably. For those who are under 65, no. We've seen too many times where the media has gotten it wrong. We've seen them plagiarize, make up stories, get the story wrong far too often. So we don't have that same trust. But and I noted this. The thing is that the structures, my big problem with polarization is the structures that are forcing this on us, that are taking the advantage of the very worst nature of human beings, to take it to, because of the authority bias, because of the way they have taught us in schools, because of the media input. It is easy to just accept or be silent, and they know that, and they're taking advantage of it. And so when we go to other countries, everything I'm saying, you can take it to any country in the world. China, Venezuela, you can go to the United Kingdom, Canada. I don't care which country it is. The same thing exists in the fact that the structure of what is making that division is exactly the same every time.
Well,
less knowledge of the people, more media control.
Well, Roger brings up another. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. I appreciate the $5. That's what I meant. Indies can be left on one issue right on another. So it's not that we are moderate, but what is the issue gives appearance of being immoderate. So I do get that point, right? And I look at politics now, and this goes back to you about Deven. The structure right now is if you're a Democrat and you get a mailing, whether it's an email or a mail or whatever text, it's the same thing. It's stop the evil Republicans from destroying them with their MAGA crazy people. Give me $10. And if you're on the right, same thing comes up. I'll stop the evil socialist Democrats from destroying the country. Give me $10. No one's saying, here's how I'm going to make your life better. They're just saying, I'm going to save you from the evil other guy. And so how do we get what Roger's talking about? How do we break this system to where people will actually move forward to achieve something? Is it a savior, right? Is it a I guess from the 70s, a Reagan-esque trying to get us away from the malaise of Carter? Is this or is it instead a figure like FDR who could bring us all together with his big government ideas, right? Is that what it is? So how do we fix this? Or are we wasting our time? Is it a savior?
Well, I think, I'm actually pretty pessimistic. I think
so am I, to be honest with you.
I think the dynamics are such that they are so self-reinforcing that it's hard to escape these cycles. But I do think that what I focus on is trying to do a grassroots thing. Like because I really think if a critical mass of people could understand these things and see the value of behaving and pushing back on the divisive rhetoric on both sides, especially on their own side, because I think the only way you really make change is with people who are politically similar to you, because the other side will never listen to you. So you have to work on your own side and make your own side less divisive and more reasonable as much as you can. If you get a critical mass of people to do that, then it would trickle up to the people that have more power. More people would start talking about it. So even it's like any cultural change. Like if enough people, in the population talk about something, it will get around.
I don't think it's we have seen, and the problem for the Republican Party very often has been that we back down too much. I think that's been true in many groups where we.
But Michael, both sides believe that. Both liberals and conservatives believe their own side backs down too much. That's the problem of polarization.
I hear that. Michael, he's right. I hear that from Democrats all the time. And the people that get mad at
we're not fighting hard enough.
Are the most popular ones. I have seen so many Democrats get mad at the Squad or AOC because they're supposed to be the champions, right?
And Michael, I would say
mad at them.
And Michael, I would say you can fight hard. I would just say keeping in mind the depolarization and respectful things, you can fight hard for whatever you want. But continue.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that, but I'm just putting a counter thought out there that separate of the extremists, which would be the Squad, AOC, and her ilk, or the far right. Maybe a Jim Jordan, some people would say, separating those extremes, when we go away from that and looking at the main body of Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, conservatives, even the Green Party, then they often are backing down because they don't believe they have a fight they can win. But what we have seen historically, as in Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, there are many examples of this in many countries. It's not in backing down. It is in confronting and asking the question. Again, which is why I'm so very much dead set on this. We must challenge the presumption of authority bias, the presumption of correctness. We must challenge it and get an answer to
hold on. If you're going to go down this road, right, if you're going to follow the Gandhi model or the MLK model, if that's your model, then that is not attacking the other at all. That's simply saying, I think I'm correct, but I'm not going to call you evil. In fact, I'm going to call you my brother. If you're going down the Malcolm X road, then you're saying, I don't need you. I'm going to go do my thing my way. We're going to be great on our own. You stay over there. We're going to be great. And we're going to show you how awesome we are. Our deeds will show us how awesome we are. Two separate ways of going down that road.
I disagree with that in part, Larry, in that you're not wrong, but it's not completely correct. It's
Okay.
in all of these cases of these individuals, and there are others around the world, we look at individuals who have challenged the authority and demanded an answer. Now, the process
That's
that
true.
they go through and the outcomes that they want from that may differ. But the main core thing is we challenge the authority, we challenge the assumption of correctness and authority bias to demand and receive an answer which they collective, and that's what the society collected around is. You have to answer this, whether it's bias or whether it's inequality or whatever the case you may want. That's it. And there is no one savior. We remember the Martin Luther King, the Malcolm X, the Gandhi, the Mother Teresa, because they stand out as the personification of it. But Malcolm X didn't do it. Martin Luther King didn't do it. It was the people walking with him in Selma that did it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me grab Roger. He asked a very important question. Thank you, Roger. Again, you are just doing super chats. I appreciate it. $10. Great. I appreciate it. Until the day we become a state, allowing voters to place initiatives and referendums on the ballot to pass/repeal New York state law and amend the New York State Constitution, we'll never truly know where New Yorkers are on the issue by issue basis. And I got to tell you, I'm a fan of this. I think Roger's correct. I think if we could, and this is why I say it, and if you're on the left, you should love this because the left has really done well with this. What does that mean? If you put on the ballot, raise minimum wage on a ballot, it wins in almost every state, regardless whether the state's blue or red. But if you have to wait for your congressman or your assemblyman or your alderman to pass this, Democrats and Republicans, it matters. So I think his point's a valid one. If you want to get past the system, right, left and right system, I'm sure it could work with the right also, but I just know it has worked recently with the left. You get past the system by using a referendum. So now it doesn't matter if I'm left or right. If I'm for the thing, I vote for the thing, regardless of what person I would support. I can love AOC or hate AOC, right? But I like the thing, so I'm voting for the thing. Zach, is this a way of fixing it, or is Roger off on this?
Sorry, could you rephrase that question?
What I'm saying is using a system to where the people can just vote for something they want, whatever that thing is, right? Now they don't have to wait for their representatives to act, who are now bound by the party and by party leadership and by the lobbyists and such, right? So they can just get what they want.
So more direct democracy.
No matter whether I'm a lefty or a righty, I just want the thing. Is that a way of getting around the left-right paradigm system?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of ideas for different policies that would, theoretically decrease polarization, like ranked choice voting. But I think the problem is we're at the point where we're so gridlocked due to polarization that we can't really affect change, even if we were to somehow, a lot of us agree that XYZ policies would reduce polarization and such. I think that's the problem with polarization. It creates such gridlock that you can't actually get much done.
I wasn't clear. Let me be clear. I'll give you a right issue. A left issue is minimum wage. A right issue is school choice. Most people want school choice. That's a right issue. Most people want to raise minimum wage. That's a left issue. So in either way, if you put those in a given state, right? New York State, you're not getting school choice unless you actually have a referendum, in which case you would get school choice in New York State. You're in Oklahoma, you're not raising the minimum wage unless you put it on a referendum, in which case you're going to raise the minimum wage. So you can get a left or right coalition by default because they want the issue. That was kind of my point. And then now if I know that even though Michael and I completely disagree on the thing, right? I know how much Michael loves minimum wage. So him and I would vote obviously opposite of that one. So if we, but on certain things we might vote together. Who knows?
True.
Yeah, I think I think even if people got what they want, it wouldn't solve the problem of the us versus them animosity. It's like that's the problem with polarization. A lot of it's so much based on emotion and the perception of the bad guys. Like it almost, you could be very comfortable in life and living a great life and still feel like I have to defeat those bad guys because they're just out there being bad, So I think these things are often so much more hard to solve and separate from the issues, which is why for my psychology podcast, I talk a lot about the kind of like the emotional basis of these things and like the psychology research about polarization, because if we talk about polarization and just talk about the issues, we're missing such a huge part of it. And then the emotions drive our stances on the issues too, because there's research showing that like the more animosity you have, a great study by James Druckmann and his colleagues showed that the more animosity people had, us versus them animosity people had pre-COVID, correlated with how extreme their stances were on COVID either way. So it was like, so our emotions on the us versus them emotions can polarize our beliefs. And one path that happens.
So that literally affects your health.
Well,
like literally you are deciding whether or not to put a substance in your body. It could affect everything.
It could affect you either way. Like you could be ultra paranoid about COVID, or you could be like ultra laissez-faire about COVID or other issues, and there's different thoughts on how that happens. Like if you're more angry, you're more likely to listen to the more polarized leaders and you follow their leads, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's like our emotions are so much causing this like divergent, these divergent
it's
narratives.
Funny you say that, Zach, because I was talking to somebody just the other day and they were telling me about how sometimes their audiences, when they're podcasting, are very aggressive and negative and mean towards other people on the shows and such. It happens on their audience. And I said, it's rare it happens on mine, here or there, but it's rare. And I think it's to your point. The people who are that polarized or angry aren't following me, right? They aren't following me. They've decided, Larry's not yelling and screaming enough, and whatever, calling the Trumpsters bad guys or telling the libs to own him or whatever. He's not doing enough of that, so we're not going to follow him. I think it's true. So then, does that mean? Because you also mentioned ranked choice voting. Does that mean if our leaders show an example of not being so polarized, that will assist in depolarization? Is that a part of it? In other words, if we just are in ranked choice voting and there's much more kumbaya and more of us start getting together to vote together, is that going to make it better?
No, because again, you're going back to the system. Well, and let me explain that again. Who's giving us the emotion? Again, it's coming from a systemic system. We're getting it from the media. We're getting it from politicians, both left and right media, but we're giving emotions. We're told, feel this. This is a big thing these days about, again, going back to the trans movement, not the trans people, the trans movement. And we're told we have to blindly affirm. We have to feel good about it. We have to feel in support of it. And no matter what it entails, including when it involves underage children, not adults, but underage children. We must affirm this with drag shows as another example. But the problem is that we're again being led. We need to challenge. Now, the best thing about what was said by Roger is when you introduce that ballot initiative, that can only work because people then have to actually challenge the assumptions. They have to know what is on the ballot. How does it affect someone? What are the consequences? You must ask questions. You must become knowledgeable and informed to make a decision, or at least more people will than do now, who are just simply going, okay, this is the emotion I'm being fed in my echo chamber. And as an example, Larry, when you said, why don't you get a lot of this pushback, this animosity that may happen on many other channels? I don't get it a lot myself. Now, there's two ways of that. Either you have an echo chamber existing, or the person that's that you're looking at, that leader of that event or whatever, isn't feeding you emotions.
That's what I was bringing up with Zach. Yeah, that's what I'm bringing up, right? I'm saying I feel like, only from my own leadership style in the past, things that I've done in my past, that the leader really is a key aspect here. If the leader's a jerk, most of the people in the leader are jerks too, right? If the leader's not a jerk, most of the people in the leader are not jerks. I mean, the people are different, right? So you're going to have some jerks no matter what, right? Always. But I feel like the leader sets the tone. And sadly, right now, in most cases, most of the cash is made by being a verbal bomb thrower, by being that everybody on who's not my friend is a Nazi, right? I mean, that's kind of you know, that's the guy making all the cash, right? That's the guy who's getting millions of views. So
That's
I feel
CNN.
like we've trained
That's
them
Fox
to
News.
do that.
I think there definitely are systemic elements to it. I mean, I think of it as like a hurricane, like polarization is like a big storm that pulls in all these factors, all these systemic factors, human factors. But I think if we just try to blame specific people or systemic elements to it, I think it misses the very human aspect of it, because we can become polarized. I mean, history shows groups becoming polarized all the time, and so I think keeping that in mind, helps lower our anger. Because I mean, for one example, like I'll give you one example, like when Trump tried to was booed for trying to tell people to take the vaccine and stuff. I mean,
I remember that.
There's a limit to how much a leader can do, right? Like if you're a leader, you have to take into account, or someone trying to find an audience, whatever, you have to take into account the dynamics, right? And you have to keep them in, or you're going to lose your audience, right? There's only so much a leader can do if they don't keep in touch with the people, right? And so it's a complex thing.
And I remember this happened before too, right? Those people booed Trump, but that's Trump's fault for riling them up, right? I look back at, this is way back in the day of Louis Farrakhan, when he was much more of a player many years ago. He had riled up so many people in the Nation of Islam to hate everybody. He had riled them up so much that when he began to become more mainstream, they were like, you can't become mainstream. Oh, no, you can't. You have riled us up for years, and now you become mainstream? We're going to get rid of you. So he had to stay the way he had raised his people, if that makes any sense. Otherwise, they would have left him.
Right.
And I think Trump raised those people that way. AOC.
It's complex. It's complex.
Way. She raised them. And so now she can't go back. And now when she goes back, they turn on her. Now when Trump goes back, they turn on him. Farrakhan, they turned on him. Aren't these leaders raising people to this fervor? And then when things go bad, now they're stuck?
Well, yes and no. To the extent that, yes, again, this is they're feeding emotions. You're getting the authority bias. You're getting the emotion being directed to you, and you're supposed to echo chamber, accept it, and don't ask questions. So there is a part of that. But depending on some of these examples, we're looking at individuals who are also evaluating, and they're asking questions. The biggest thing about, in particular, when we talk about the pandemic medication and the objection to it, that wasn't an emotional pushback. That was a pushback based on knowledge. These were people, look at the arguments they were making. They didn't say, no, I just don't accept your answer. They said, well, this scientifically doesn't make sense. It hasn't been credibly reviewed. This is an experimental drug. I have issues with taking
Michael, I love you, brother, but I know lots of people who did none of that research whatsoever.
And I know
they
lots
just
of
said
people,
my talking head said it's good, or my talking head said it's bad.
And I was at many a protest that had a very different statement about that.
Deven, go ahead.
I was going to agree with you on that, Larry. Is like a lot of people didn't do any research. I had people in my family who were like, "Oh, I'm not going to do it because Tucker Carlson told me not to take it." Yep. And then he would bring some person who you can't ask questions to, you can't question who they are, who they belong to, what type of, I guess, political faction they're a part of. You can't ask any of those questions, and they're there to tout the facts on Fox News. It's also the same thing that CNN does. They just get people up there. You can't talk about it. You can't ask any questions.
And MSNBC were yelling at us, Michael. They were telling us that children were dying. Literally no children died of COVID. Oh, I'm sorry. No healthy children died. There were kids who had comorbidities who did die. There were some who had that. But literally no healthy children died of COVID at all. And they were telling us every day, it's killing the children. And nobody was checking that. A Google search would have shown that to be false. Nobody checked it.
But see, here's the thing. I'm not looking at, you guys may not be aware. A lot of people watching may not be aware. I haven't seen cable television or news, whether network or cable, in the last 20 years. Actually, maybe 25. So
I watch it every day.
I don't follow them. I follow international news. I follow stories. I follow the actual reporting out there. And so what I can tell you is when I was covering live protests, I was talking to doctors, nurses, when I was listening to what I could see on social media and multiple smaller channels, not the large ones, not the ones that are being pushed by YouTube and Facebook, but when I'm looking at the mid-level and lower channel after channel, stream after stream, and tweet after tweet, the majority of people had an issue, had a basis for it that had nothing to do with I feel. They had.
I hope you're right, Michael. I'm telling you, I did not see that. I saw most people I saw on both sides did not do any research whatsoever. Go ahead, Deven.
Twitter isn't really a good analogy, I guess, of what humans are like. There's a lot of people who, like, we live in upstate New York. There's a lot of Amish people in upstate New York.
Yep.
Those people don't watch anything. Those people aren't on Twitter. Those people aren't on any of that stuff. So we don't even know what they think unless we actually go there and ask them. Relying on Twitter for
Twitter actually has one of the smallest user bases of all the major things. It has a relative. I mean, obviously, I wish I had.
Notice I didn't mention Twitter.
Yes.
Notice I didn't.
Let me
mention
grab a couple of these if I could real fast.
Tweets.
Roger goes on and says, again, 2 hours. Thank you, Roger. You can stay polarized as long as I get my thing.
Yeah.
And
Kathy says, I want the thing is a great way to avoid left or right BS. Yes, I go out of my way to avoid the left or right BS. I try very hard to avoid it to the best of my ability. I appreciate that. So thank you for noticing that. And that's my point, right? I don't want to judge the thing. I know people, and to Zach's point, I wish our government, even though I would disagree with many things, I still wish our government was better at delivering. I wish if you actually voted for what you wanted, you'd actually get what you voted for. Even though I might disagree with it, I wish it actually worked, because then at least people would then believe in it. We have people in the system that can maybe convince them. That would be nice. So yes. Patty says, I'm fighting for the working homeless. Thank you again, Patty, for the $5. I appreciate that. And about to be a gray-haired old lady making good trouble in upstate for both parties ignoring the issue. And this goes with what you're talking about, Zach. You're saying that local grassroots is more important. Let me ask you, while I love what Patty's doing, and I want her to keep doing it, she's in upstate. She's in Plattsburgh area, by the way. So she's also a New Yorker. Zach, why? Why is what Patty's doing and what you're saying better than, I don't know, trying to get a savior as president or whatever, trying to find the next, JFK or whoever I think is the savior? Why is local better than a better king?
Yeah, there's so Ezra Klein had a book, Why We're Polarized, which I actually ironically found quite polarizing and biased itself, but I wasn't a big fan of it. But one thing he did say towards the end was, and that I agree with, is that we should focus more on the things that are actually going on around us in our community instead of these big. So many of us focus on these things that we literally have no control over. Like they're just things that we get angry about, and we literally, except for voting for our one representative, which is probably already a preordained result in whatever state we're in, or voting for the president, these things we barely have any control over, but we get so angry about them. Instead of why don't we put that energy into working on something in our community? And Ezra Klein talks about that at the end of his book, and I think it's a great point. And we also mistakenly, I think, feel like there's some nobility just to paying attention to politics. We're good people just for knowing about it. But it's there's a great book I interviewed him for my podcast called Why It's Okay to Ignore Politics. And it's not like he's not going to convince you to ignore politics, but he makes some really good, he's a political philosopher, and he makes some really good points about pushing back on this, there's almost assumption that people have, oh, we're good people because we know what's going on. Whereas no, why don't you actually do something that's helping someone in your community? Maybe that's a much better use of your time and a better moral thing than knowing about something and getting angry about something that you can't change. Right?
I agree with what you're saying, Zach, but I have a problem because we live in New York State, which is the state is more and more overbearing in every single thing we do. And there's no doubt, and Pat doesn't even tell me this, I know already, the state has gotten in her way. How do I know that? Because it always gets in the way of somebody doing something good. It just does. I don't know how it's done it, but I can guarantee it has. It gets in the way of everything. And if we do something wrong, we're literally going to end our life because they're going to put us in jail. They're going to, take away our house, whatever, stop us from driving, whatever the thing they're going to do. So I get the point, but I worry that in a state, I mean, we live in Wyoming. I don't care. There's like not even a government in Wyoming. Anyway, my point being, if we live in New York State, though, the state is overbearing. It will literally come in and stop you.
Well, that's good local issues to work on, right? That's more healthy than like, just getting angry about stuff nationally that you can't change.
Oh,
right?
I got you. Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
Even
like,
that's okay.
all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying it.
We
should ignore politics. I was just saying it was an interesting book for questioning some of our assumptions.
I'll buy it. Yeah, Deven, go ahead.
So I'm going to agree with Zach here on that. There's just, I lost my train of thought the moment I started to talk.
No worries whatsoever, brother. I'm glad you're here. It's all good. Let me grab a couple of more of these comments if I could. I do appreciate all the super chats, guys. I really do. It matters tremendously to keep the show going. Dan says, you're right, Larry. This show is not friendly to people who want thoughts fed to them and who pose the am I wrong question. It's true. I do a lot of weird stuff with different people and different backgrounds. It's very true. Once in a while, I will literally just say, here's my opinion. Here's how I think. But even when I do it, I always take comments that are against it. So I still will do that even when I tell you that I think I'm right, because I always think I'm right. I'm just not always right. Well, yeah, I am, Deven. I'm always right. Yes, go ahead, Deven.
So I finally do remember what I was going to say. I was going to say one of the reasons why grassroots and local elections and stuff are so important is because they're the building blocks of the government. If you take away like the mayors that contribute to the bloat and to the corruption, and you take away like the state assembly people, and you take away all of those people, and you replace them with people who are actually like good and people who you are good for whatever side you present, but basically people who aren't fixated on problems that are happening in California when we're in New York, like things that they don't even have legislative control.
Yeah, no, the 2A people always focus on sheriffs, right? If you're a Second Amendment supporter, Second Amendment supporters very often will focus on sheriffs because the sheriffs are not going to enforce the horrible Second Amendment laws. So they focus on that. That's a local issue like that. If you're more worried about schools, you'll focus on PTA, right? You'll focus on school board, right? You'll focus on that thing. So I see your point, right? If you're able to you kind of take the government on its knees, because the foot soldier of the federal government is often going to be a local official, right? The foot soldier is often going to be a local official. I don't know, Michael, you disagree?
But no, in part, because the reason why, yes, local is absolutely important, because at the local level, people know the issue. Again, it goes back to knowledge, information. You can easily disseminate and understand the local issue, which may be interrelated with the next county, which may be interrelated with the state, which may in fact be interrelated with the nation, such as an issue. Yeah, I'm going to go to my sheriff because on the county level, he's going to either enforce or not enforce red flag laws, which is a state issue, which is also attempting to become a national issue on several levels. So they're all interrelated, but I may understand it the best at my local level. That's because of the knowledge and the feedback I have. The question is, what are we doing there? Well, we're asking our local officials, the elected officials, okay, give me an answer. I have a question. How does this work? Is it working effectively, efficiently? And we accept that. The problem is most people disconnect the moment you go above the local level. They suddenly fall into the echo chamber, and that's where the polarization begins.
I would go one step further, though, Michael. I think most people, and this is to Zach's point, I think most people know who their congressman is, or maybe, but don't know who their local person is. They're more likely to vote for Congress or president or whatever than they are for the local assemblyman or I mean, you see the turnout. The turnout, you've run, Michael. You know the turnout locally is terrible compared to the turnout in this statewide election?
I want to answer that, but Deven, you had something to say. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you let the state run anything, it's going to be inefficient.
You're not wrong.
Usually, you almost always, and I agree with that. That's because we accept it. It's because we accept the way that we are being given the choices. We can change that. Again, at the local level, we just have petitions in New York State. Many states just went through the petition series. How many people actually put up a candidate and said, I want that person to run, and went out and got signatures for that person, whether they're libertarian, conservative, Republican, or Democrat, doesn't matter. How many people actually did that? I can tell you that it's about 1/10 of the number of people who are registered to any given party, whatever party it may be. So people aren't getting involved because they have been told for many, many years on all kinds of media, you can't change anything. You can't fight the government.
But then, Michael, it's not just being told; they're also seeing it. Like, I'll give the perfect example, and this will make the people on the left, understand completely. How long has the left been saying they were going to codify Roe v. Wade?
And they didn't do it.
But
never did it. For literally 20 years, they were saying they were going to do it. Never did it. How many times has the right said they're going to solidify Second Amendment laws? Never did it. Never.
They could run on it.
Never. Right? So both sides who are looking for something get no change. How many times has everybody been saying, can we lower property taxes?
Yeah, but
never. That's both sides.
Yeah, but Larry, the thing is, and you guys may disagree with this, the problem is because Congress has an 88% re-election rate. You are literally, after being elected once to Congress, after that, you have an 88% of chance of being reelected. And in fact, your chance of dying in office is higher than you ever retiring from office. So, and that's just the fact going back the last 40 years. The problem is people aren't engaging in that. They're just accepting. Again, they're falling back into echo chambers, into the systemic. And it's not systemic racism. I don't believe in that, but it's the systemic push of emotions and authority bias and the echo chamber that entails.
So let me do a little bit of admin if I could, guys. It's a Sharpe Club, guys. Thank you so much. And please do me a favor. Click that like button. If you like what you're hearing, if you like us going back and forth, that makes sense to you. If Zach hasn't bummed you out and let us believe that the whole world's going to end tomorrow, if he hasn't done it, he's about to. But if he hasn't yet, click the like button. It might be the last thing you do. So do it anyway if you can. If you want to get your comments to the front quickly, you can always super chat me on Larry Sharpe YouTube. If you are watching on Twitter, please retweet this. It's how I get past the algorithms, right? That and liking. And I'm also asking if you can, head over to theadvocates.org. They are my sponsor. Take one of their surveys, take one of their quizzes. It's free. Takes you a couple minutes. Share it. It keeps them happy. It keeps us happy. It supports the show, and it's free. So please do it if you would, if you care about what's going on. Keep the show going. And lastly, support these people here who came today to give us some of their time. Follow them on Twitter or follow them also on their other pages that are in the description. That is awesome. If you could, that I would appreciate that tremendously. So, Zach, I know I just teased you, but give us some good news.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't sound that pessimistic, do I? I know I said I was kind of pessimistic. But no, I mean, there are researchers, one of the quotes I think I lead with in the book is by these researchers who say, it's really hard to know how these dynamics will go. Like there's a chance things may ease in terms of the us versus them animosity. There's a chance things will increase. I think it's really good to when it comes to that to have a lot of humility and not be overly certain, because there's people that will have very, very certain, we're going to enter a civil war, which can have kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy thing, because both sides are like, hey, we're going to have a civil war. Better get ready for that, So, I think it's good to be humble and acknowledge that there are people that study these things that are like, well, we don't know how it's going to turn out. There's it's such a complex, situation, a complex equation.
But the Civil War piece, right, that you bring up, this does scare me, because this polarization, we've been talking about politically more than anything else, but it's not just political. It's romance. It's, people having friendships.
culture.
There are people who are like, I can't date someone who's not a conservative or who's not a liberal, right? There are people who won't do it, or they don't talk to their family. I don't talk to my brother anymore. He loves Trump. I don't talk to my cousin anymore. He thinks AOC is great. I don't talk to him anymore. It's literally breaking up families and stopping people from having relationships. I mean, Deven, you lean left and you live in Wayne County. Wayne County's red. You've got to feel that, don't you?
So I would probably label myself moderate to some extent, just because like I believe like, Second Amendment is pretty good, and like, people have the right to defend themselves against tyranny and everything else like that. But the problem, at least for me, comes into, if it was a perfect world, I would like all of these things. However, it's an imperfect world, so we need to compromise.
Right. But don't you feel like there are people out there in your area who are going to judge you if you're not left or right enough? And if you're not right enough in any given case, whatever the case may be, I don't know if I can be Devin's friend. He doesn't support the guy or gal that I support. I don't know if I can hang out with that guy.
Actually, funnily enough, I used to work at the local supermarket here, and a person who would drive around with a van behind his truck, pull it with swastikas, all sorts of those types of symbols. And he tried to be my friend. And I was like, nope, not even gonna.
Well, nope. I'm not saying swastikas, Deven. I'm not going down that road. Come on.
If somebody is extreme enough,
they like, I don't know, they like Ted Cruz or something, whatever. That's a right enough person, right? They like Ted Cruz. Or
I would ask them why.
They like AOC or whatever, right? They like that person. I just ask them
why. That's how I approach everything, is I just ask people like, hey, why do you like these things? And most of the time people can't really give an answer regardless.
Yeah,
why do you like this person?
How are we going to allow, the idea of I can date somebody who isn't, that doesn't believe in the same politics that I believe in?
Well, and that's that is the toxic thing about polarization. It creates more and more animosity. And I think, when it comes to people on both sides that I either get along with or don't get along with, I mean, the dimension is not really like necessarily what they believe, but it's how much animosity do they have towards people who don't agree with them, right? And it's like, I know people on the left and the right that I no longer want to be friends with because I feel like they've kind of been driven mad by the animosity, and I have friends and acquaintances on both sides that, they might believe a lot of the same things as those other people, but they're able to see the other side's perspective in a way that the really angry people are not. And I think that's really what what we have to foster, is just recognizing that, trying to see the best in other people, even as we very much may disagree with them.
But the I want to bring up here is people will often use almost like a litmus test question to see if they're prepared to talk or be around you. So when I'm running for office, obviously it's a lot, but even when I'm not running for office, people still do it. Like I'll be here in New York and someone will say something in New York City and someone says something like, Larry, that Trump guy, huh? That's all they'll say. And they're waiting for me to make a decision on that. And then they're going to judge me based upon that. If I go,
are you on my team or not?
American again, then they're like, okay, he's that guy. Or if I go, I hate that guy, I hope he goes to jail. Oh, okay, he's that guy. Like they want to judge me based upon how I answer that question.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm not running for office now. This is just me like getting, I don't know, like getting a taco or something. Right? This is just like me talking to regular people. And I still get that. By the way, guys, you might see Michael popping in and out. He had a power surge where he is.
Oh, okay.
He's having a power surge. He's trying to get back on. So he's having some power issues in his area, maybe a storm or something, just if you're wondering why Michael's popping in and out.
I will say to that, Larry, the best depolarization book I've read, which I only read recently, I wish I'd read it a couple of years ago, or whenever it came out, is called Sustaining Democracy by Robert Talisse. And I actually interviewed him for my podcast, hasn't come out yet. But he talks about how one of the bad things about extreme polarization is not only does it make us more, have more animosity towards the other side and less able to get along with the other side, it also makes us unable to form coalitions even with people who are very, very similar with us, because it kind of fractures us and makes more people focused on like a purity and a righteousness. So that he talks about that in there. That was a very good section in his book, because that's what we see around us. It's like people lose the ability to even form a political coalition. You know, it's like they become so angry even amongst people who are quite similar to them otherwise. So I think that's a great point.
You must have seen libertarians, because that's us. Libertarians, we will be like libertarians. There'll be 12 libertarians in a room and 14 opinions. And there'll be 12 libertarians in a room, and we will agree on 99%. But there'll be one thing we disagree, and you're not a real libertarian. You're horrible. You're mean. I can't talk to you. We do that all the time. I think it's because we've been disrespected as a group for so long that we have a lot of animosity towards the state, towards the two-party system, towards the whole thing. We have a lot of animosity. I think you're right. We have a lot of animosity, and it makes the point where there are people who will get angry because I talk. I'm not joking. Because I talk to non-libertarians. Right. I have non-libertarians on my show, and they get angry because how dare him have a non-libertarian on the show?
I had friends who asked me, like, why are you even talking to that guy? I'm like, it's an interesting conversation to have with people.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, there's a great Intercept article. I don't know if you all have seen it, about how a lot of progressive nonprofits were kind of torn apart by the the racial justice and post George Floyd, which was a great article. I mean, there's just so much fractiousness on both sides that kind of rip various organizations or groups apart.
Yeah, people don't realize that, and I've been saying it for a while. The left is in a civil war, and they often don't see it, because when it comes to voting in Congress, the left tends to vote in a nice solid block. So it looks like the left is not in a civil war. Absolutely not true. The left and the right are both in a civil war. It's just more obvious on the right because Trump is such a big figure, right? Trump is such a massive figure. It's easy to see the Republican civil war. It's not as easy to see the Democratic civil war, but it's absolutely happening.
But what's funny is people on both sides, like when I tell liberals, you know, the point of view that Republicans view themselves as fractured and fighting all the time, liberals are like, what are you talking about? They're so good at forming this uniform monolithic group. But that's the very nature of polarization, is that we view the other side as this monolithic beast, and we view our side as like fractured and like have a variety of experiences, and we view the other side as like they're all aligned and they all believe these terrible things and they're all coming after us. And that's like the nature of polarization. Like people on both sides are just like shocked when I tell them that each side views their own side as fractured, you know, and that's interesting. That's very interesting in itself, and says a lot about the dynamics.
Well, I would go one step further. Once you hate the other, you always do two things. The other is both completely stupid and also so smart they're going to kill us all. They're always both of those things.
The worst of all worlds.
Say again, Deven. I'm sorry. Say again.
I said you got to make up your mind when you're trying to like fear monger or hate monger people. You have to make up your mind. Are they going to destroy us all, or are they inept?
Right.
Personally,
yes.
I believe that just how the two-party system is right now is we're going to end up destroying each other.
Well, Deven, you might find this interesting. Look up Juan Linz, Linz. He was a political philosopher who said that there were fundamentally polarizing things about the American form of government, and it's why when America tries to set up democracies overseas, they don't use our form of democracy, because there's fundamentally polarizing aspects with regards to how the elections are staggered, basically, so that there's not the Congress and the president don't have as much incentive to get along with each other. There's more incentive to not get along with each other. But anyway, it's really interesting stuff about how there's these structural things about American form of government that lend themselves to polarization.
I mean, even electoral colleges do that now as well. A lot of people are calling for electoral colleges to be removed. And I'm kind of on the fence about that issue myself, because I see the need for it, but I also see the need to get rid of it.
Yeah, and we're so gridlocked. I don't think we'll ever get rid of it. Even if, it's one of those things. It's like what we're never gonna be aligned enough to change a lot of these big things. It's almost
I got to tell you, the thing that I've learned running for office is really talking to the two parties, which I hadn't really talked too much in the past, but like understanding the difference between a Republican, a conservative. I thought they were all the same, right? But now I understand. Or a leftist and a liberal. I thought they were all the same. Now learning that there's a difference between the two was something that I had to learn by being involved in talking to people, right? But if you look to your point, Zach, if someone who's deep in the Republican Party or deep in that, they look at all leftists as the same. Someone who's deep in the Democratic side looks at all people on the right as the same. All Republicans are the same. When they are different, there is a difference between those two, and others are right in between as you break up. There's a difference, and people just don't see it. And I don't, maybe I'm the guy, maybe I'm the crazy one, but I feel like there has to be more people doing the types of things that I'm doing to get more people in a room, to have these kind of conversations more often, to make it happen this way. I feel someone's got to do it. And I feel like there aren't enough of guys like me doing it. That's my feeling right now. Too many people are just going only for the bag and saying, look, if I just yell Trump is evil, I get tons of money, or I just yell Trump is the God King, I get tons of money, right? So I'm going to do one of those two, and I'm gonna get the bag. And that part that drives me crazy. So
no, I think it's great you're doing that. I mean, that's kind of like it's similar to the polarization work that I do. It's like, I don't pretend to have, the answers, because I don't think anyone has the answers. It's more like we just need more people trying to see the best in other people and trying to break down some of these distorted perceptions we have of, what the other side wants and what they're really like. And the more people we have doing that, it's like it spreads through a population, just like any cultural change. So I think it's great that you try to bring people together and have tough conversations. Yeah.
Well, I think that I've literally had communists on my show, and I'm a libertarian, and I've had communists on my show. And, it's funny how many people have actually watched the show and they talk. So now my thought process has always been the same way, right? If the best way to get me to not hate the other is to have an actual conversation with the other, right? To actually talk to that person, right? What's the thing that's about the thing you saw all the time in the 80s and 90s? How did a family all of a sudden go from anti-gay to pro-gay? They found out someone they loved was gay. That's what turned them, right? They found out someone they loved was gay. Oh, so gay people aren't this evil monolith I've made up in my mind. No, someone that I love is actually gay. Okay, so I can have the conversation. And I took that mindset as I watched it happen in the 80s and 90s, because when I joined the Marine Corps in the 80s, you couldn't be gay in the Marine Corps, right? They would literally throw you out. You could not be gay in the Marine Corps. This is before even don't ask, don't tell, right? I was in the Marine Corps in the 80s. You could not be gay in the Marine Corps. So, I mean, obviously there were gay people in the Marines. I mean, obviously there were, because there's gay people everywhere. So obviously there were, but there was no openly gay Marines. None. Nobody was open, or you were gone. So there were no openly gay Marines. So I remember, though, that the people in the Marine Corps, many of them were very anti-gay. Many of them were. But those who weren't, every one of them was like, how can I be anti-gay? My brother's gay. Or how can I be gay? My cousin's gay, or whatever. Like I remember they always knew somebody who was gay. And that's why I keep that same mindset. The conversations matter. That's what matters. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're getting Michael back. I think he has lost his power. So before we wrap this up, guys, is there anything that we have missed that we should be talking about that we missed?
I don't think so.
I'm going to take that as a no.
I think we got a pretty good standard.
We solved it all.
Yeah, we solved it all the answers.
Yeah.
If you guys want the answer to the universe, just watch the podcast.
That's it. Watch the podcast. It is all done. Guys, I want to say, please like that button. If you liked it, it does matter. If you watch this on Twitter, please retweet it. Even if it's over, please retweet it. It does matter. Every single tweet, every single like does matter. We're trying to break the algorithms to make this thing explode. Thank you for those of you who super chatted me on YouTube. I do appreciate it. And of course, please follow these gentlemen. Please follow them all. All their stuff is in the description on both YouTube and on Facebook. Follow them. Give them a little bit of love. They gave us some love. Give them some love. I really appreciate it. Guys, I will see you all